you're gonna have a massive rethink after you see this. Logan Paul's pretty well known for a great number of things, but being Christian isn't one of them. However, he's a very curious guy, and when you have Cliffe Knechtle in the room, who knows when you're gonna be this close to him again, right? Paul uses this opportunity to run a few things about God by Cliffe, and what happens next is a journey into predeterminism, free will, justice, and a whole lot more. Meanwhile, don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification button for more videos like this. Let's get this show on the road.
I want to touch on the soul thing really quick because this has always intrigued me. Okay, so the soul is the person that can be shaped by human experience. So like if you were to like run a simulation of like Cliffe, 100 simulations of the life of Cliffe in some future distant world, do you become a pastor in all 100 of those simulations? Is every one of those simulations, is Cliffe a good guy? Especially if the human experience that each Cliffe experience or goes through is different. And then does your soul become a different thing?
I don't think so, because that smacks of determinism. It's in the stars. It's written in the stars. You have to do this. You have to go down this path. No. When I fall down a set of stairs, I don't pick myself up at the bottom and say, phew, glad that's over. No, I pick myself up at the bottom and say, idiot, pick up your feet. Don't stumble down the stairs. It's really painful. In other words, it's not been predetermined. That's this whole issue of free will. That's why I hold you responsible and you hold me responsible for what I do, for what I say, because you know I don't have to do it.
It's not a script.
Exactly. It's not a script. This whole idea that God writes on a piece of paper, what you and I are going to do tomorrow, locks it in a bank vault, and then you and I have to do what's written on the paper. That's determinism. That's fatalism. No. No, we're human beings created in the image of God, which means God partially limits his power by giving us a free will, and then we choose what we do. But God does hold us responsible. That's why I love what you pointed out about the importance of responsibility. But you know, Logan, you and Jesus are, I think, a little closer than you might realize when you talk about justice.
I love how Cliffe outlines his response to Logan here. Questions like this don't require yes or no answers. And Cliffe's response does it for me because it shows that not all concepts or phenomena are autonomous. Some are connected and derive their meaning from that connection. So, by showing the impossibility of Logan's position, Cliffe shows us that the soul is highly unique in the sense that it's not the product of predeterminism, but of free will. In other words, there's no heavenly script that commandeers our lives. Our souls are saved or damned by how we use our free will. I must say, this is a really refreshing angle, because once I got it, the idea of God's judgment became a lot more understandable. And here's what I mean.
But God does hold us responsible. That's why I love what you pointed out about the importance of responsibility. But you know, Logan, you and Jesus are, I think, a little closer than you might realize when you talk about justice.
That's going to get clipped up, man.
Okay?
That was...
Justice.
That's going everywhere.
The reason is, why did Christ die on a cross? He didn't die on a cross because God is lovey-dovey. He died on a cross because God is just. And because God is just, the penalty for evil is death and hell. And Christ went to the cross, paid that penalty. Why? Because God's lovey-dovey? No, because God is just. The penalty for human evil must be paid. Oh, that's not cool. That's not cool. Oh, that's very cool. I understand you're an expectant father. Little baby coming into the world?
Little baby girl.
Your mom was bragging to me about it.
Yeah. Little baby girl.
Sounds good.
Yep.
All right, Logan. Now let's talk theoretically.
Okay.
Let's say somebody murders that little baby.
God damn it, Cliffe. What?
Why? Because you know very well that if the police or the judge lets that dude off scot-free, your baby does not matter. Now, what's fascinating is the way so many secular people will say, well, God's just love, so there's going to be no judgment. Really? So God doesn't judge the guy who murders my child? That's a clear statement on God's part. Your child, Cliffe, does not matter to me. Therefore, I will not judge the guy who murdered your kid. Well, let's get one thing straight. God doesn't care about your kid. Your kid does not matter to God. And that's a lie. Jesus said, no, God does care about every single one of us, which is why when we hurt each other, when we rape each other, when we cut each other off at the knees, God will judge us for that because he loves us because we matter to him.
I like the analogy Cliffe used, although it's kind of heavy on the sensitive side, and it's not because of how he used it to explain God's judgment. Don't get me wrong, he nailed it, but I ran on an entirely different track, and for me, that put a slightly better finishing touch on the idea of God's judgment. For some reason, it helped me understand God's place as a father, who sent down his only son to die because that was the only way he could redeem humanity and make it so all of them escape the condemnation that comes with sin, only for humanity to continue in sin afterwards. Add to that the entitlement to expect not to be held accountable as well. Do you get where I'm going with this? Continuing in sin after Jesus' death on the cross is more or less telling God that the life of his son never mattered, that we don't matter, because justice and judgment exists because somebody or something matters.
What I have always struggled with is like the proof per se. Like I haven't really had like a come to Jesus moment that I know some people have had. I haven't had and have abided by the guidance of the Bible to lead me to like a happy, successful place in my life. I just try to be a good person. I try to work hard and I try to love the people around me as much as I can. And by the way, I f up a lot, but I guess like I started by saying I'm just like unwilling to subscribe to a religion, because then I guess this leads into this conversation. Why Christianity? There's so many denominations out there, and to be able to like put your foot down on one, especially when they all have such positive teachings for the most part, it's just so hard for me. I just don't know if I'm willing to make that assertion just yet. So why Christianity is the question.
All right. First of all, you're right. I can't prove God. But Logan, I think you've got God bearing down hard on you through your mom. I think it's real clear that your mom loves you. I don't think that your mom's love for you is simply a chemical reaction. I think your mom has made a decision over your entire life to care for you, to provide for you, to protect you, to sacrifice for you. That is far beyond an animal instinct. That is a free decision your precious mother has made to really love you, to really care for you. Love, the experience of love, points us to reality, including some type of God. Okay, then the next question is, yeah, but who is this God? And that's where Jesus Christ, Muhammad, Confucius, Buddhists, all the avatars of Hinduism come in, all claiming to be revealing God accurately. But the historical evidence is Jesus lived a sinless life. He never sinned once. In John chapter 8, he could look into the faces of his enemies and say, which one of you can prove me guilty of sin? And his enemies were silent. Secondly, he taught amazing ethical teachings that I think all of us respect highly. The Sermon on the Mount is obviously ethical genius. All right, profound ethical genius. The Sermon on the Mount, Matthew chapters 5, 6, and 7. So his lifestyle, his ethical teachings demand respect. Thirdly, you watch him die. At the moment of his most excruciating pain and agony, nailed to a wooden crossbeam, instead of cursing his enemies the way I would have, he prays, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do.
Logan raises a highly significant question, which I think is a close follow-up on the last clip. It's almost like he's trying to find out God's criteria for judgment. Which religion keeps you safe and which one doesn't? Why must it be Christianity? Cliffe says in many words what I'm about to say in 4. The life of Jesus. Out of every religious figure in the world, Jesus is the most prolific, the most special, and also the most questioned. Everything about him, from birth to resurrection, marks him out from the rest. You can say a lot of things about Jesus. You can say he's only a prophet. You can say he wasn't real. But what you'll not say is that he isn't holy and righteous and good. You can't say he isn't full of love. You can't say that he isn't perfect. Study the life of Jesus closely, and you'll see that God furnished us with enough signs. Signs that will convince you if you have an open mind. At the end of the day, the question really isn't about religion, but about the state of your heart. Because if you're genuinely in search of truth, you will find it. Jesus cares about you too much to leave you out to dry. But Logan doesn't end there.
I have a question. How do you know that?
You know that in the same way that you know that George Washington was the first president of the United States, that you know that Adolf Hitler really committed the atrocities he did. It's called historical knowledge.
But those recent events those events you just cited happened much more recently.
Yes.
And are much more well documented
Yes.
than potentially 2,000 years of lost history.
Bingo. Correct. But the great news is, in the Gospels of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, we have a very, very reliable historical record based on over 5,800 Greek manuscripts, 10,000 manuscripts in the Latin Vulgate, and about 9,800 in Ethiopic, Coptic, Armenian, Syriac, Gothic, and Slavic.
Basically, like they were almost approved and given credibility to in the short term thereafter, and that added a more extensive proof to the story back then.
Essentially, they were like corroborated.
Yeah, that's
evidence.
That's kind of what I'm.
Funny question there, Logan. How do you know this? As Cliffe would just be speaking about Jesus because they were buddies when he came to Earth 2,000 years ago. The truth is, the best proof you're going to get about Jesus' existence is when you follow him. The proof for the existence of Jesus is different for historians than it is for genuine Christians. Historians tell you Jesus is real because there are historical texts that account for it. Genuine Christians tell you that he's real because they experience him all the time. But if historical proof is what you're after, you're gonna get it. You've believed the evidence of historians and archaeologists for a while now. If Jesus is where you draw the line, then the problem is clearly not with Jesus.
I don't love the sort of like exclusive club feeling, oh, you can get into heaven if you believe in Jesus, but everyone else is doomed. I don't love that, right? Because there are people who have the same amount of faith in their religion as you guys do in yours, who are putting their time, effort, energy, investing their whole lives into believing in a deity. And like, according to you guys, they won't end up in a place that is paradise, even though they're leading a great life and have a great moral compass.
The legitimacy of faith is not determined by passion. If you're passionate about thin ice on a lake, I really believe this thin ice is going to hold me up. That doesn't matter.
Yeah.
You walk out on that thin ice, you're going through, sir.
Yeah.
So the legitimacy of faith is determined by the trustworthiness of the object of your faith. If it's thick ice and you believe just a little and you step out on that ice, it's going to hold you up. You see, remember, I'm not going to heaven because I'm passionate. No. I'm a dirty, rotten sinner. Christ died on a cross for me. I have put my faith in him. I doubt, man. I sin every day. I am no perfect human specimen. I'm a dirty, rotten sinner. That's who I am.
Wait, Cliffe, you keep saying that, but like you're I don't know you that well, right? So in my head, you're like painting a picture of someone that I just don't believe you are. Is that you being humble? Are you like a really,
right,
are you actually like a dirty, rotten sinner?
Probably his sins might be different.
It comes down to how you define sin. No, I have never, not even dated, but I have lusted. No, I have never murdered anybody, but I have hated. No, I have never brought a whip down on the back of a black slave, not once. But I, as a white American, have had subtle racist attitudes. No, I don't live an incredibly opulent life, but I have been greedy.
Wow. I mean, that response from Cliffe kind of blew my mind. I mean, the degree of honesty was clarifying for Logan, who thought sin had to be something heinous, amoral, or immoral. But it was also thought-provoking. Because, come on, can any of us really inspect ourselves and say our moral compass has been enough? That you've never sinned or done something wrong, even in ignorance? If we're all going to live by moral compasses now, then we're saying the death of Jesus is a waste. And that we're living by the law. But here's the catch. Romans 10:5 says, the law's way of making a person right with God requires obedience to all of its commands. In other words, if you fail one, you've failed the entire thing. Meanwhile, Jesus' way brings us under the grace made manifest by his sacrifice, so that the entire thing doesn't come undone because we've been offset by one of our imperfections. I know which side I'm on, but I'd be lying if I say I'm not bothered. In light of what Jesus brings to the table, why do people think that their moral compass is enough to guarantee their salvation? I'd love to read your thoughts down in the comments section. If you found this video interesting, you'd be doing someone a favor by sharing it with them. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.